So, I want to speak about something that might sound a bit different, but it's just the way I think about this. What I've found over time of testing and just exploring in my imagination, I have found that it might not be the best thing to think in terms of manifesting. So when I imagine, I actually don't think about like I'm doing this to manifest something. I think that takes away from the only thing that should matter, which is what Neville called the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And I think that when you try to manifest stuff, you're still so focused on the external world. And the whole point is to leave it alone, as Neville says, and change the conceptions of yourself. And conceptions are within us. So we just change who we are within imagination. And I found that when you remove the weight of trying to manifest, and you make the goal of your imaginal act to be just to simply experience it because you are what you experience, then I think a huge weight can be lifted off of you. Much resistance will leave you. Because I actually don't think in that way. I don't think about manifesting things. I just think about experiencing. I think about, I don't love the word becoming, but in some sense I'm becoming who I want to be in imagination. But the reason why I don't like the word becoming is because you already are that in imagination. Now, we must, be vulnerable enough to admit, as if I'm speaking from the outer man's perspective, this limited body, that I can't do it. The outer man can't do it. The outer man must surrender himself to the inner man. It's just an idea that you're creating in your mind that you're limited and you must admit that you're not capable. You must be vulnerable enough to admit that you can't devise the means and you don't know the when or the how. If you admit these things and surrender yourself, that you don't really know anything, the outer man doesn't. If you surrender yourself to the inner man, then the inner man already is expressing what you want in imagination. But in this body, I don't know how to do it. I'm not sure how to devise the means. I admit that. I surrender myself, and I just experience what the inner man's experiencing. And I make that my goal. So I don't try to manifest stuff. I think that trying to manifest is in its own way a blockage. What I try to do is, the moment I close my eyes, the external world leaves me. That's how I think of it. That none of it is true. It was created by the imagination. In some sense, we do live in a world of imagination. Or I say an imaginary world. Because the facts that were created today were thought of yesterday. And they can change tomorrow. But it's difficult to feel the wish fulfilled when you're still focusing on trying to manifest. And the reason for that is because the wish that is fulfilled is happening within you. And you can't fully be immersed within if you're still focused on the external. The best way I can explain is that I experience what the inner man's experiencing. I take upon his experience. And I become him. And that's my goal. Not necessarily to manifest, but to be the inner man who's experiencing it. That's the goal for me. Because I found that all I would be doing if I did have my desire fulfilled would be I would just be experiencing it. I would just experience the fulfillment. So Neville calls it feeling the wish fulfilled. I just say experience the wish fulfilled. Experience your desire being fulfilled. Experience what the inner man's experiencing. And make that the goal. And you'll feel far less resistance. And you're creating the resistance anyways. You can also look at it that way. When you have resistance, it's because you are still identifying with the external. But you have to identify with the one within who already is experiencing it. As it was once said that the outer man will say it's impossible, but the inner man says, isn't it wonderful? Because he already is experiencing the fulfillment. And that's a really good way of looking at it. I mean, that's how I look at it. I find that viewing it that way, that I'm the stateless being, is the much more relieving and natural way of assuming that you are what you want to be. Because if you know that you're not the assumption itself, but the assumer, then I think your confidence goes up and you stop identifying with states and you stop identifying with its behaviors. And you see that that's all stemming from a belief about yourself. So you leave the world alone and you go within and you change who you are inside yourself. And you can put a frame of reference in front of you and have someone reply to you telling you that you are now this person. They're not telling you to become it. You already are it. They're just reflecting you. So you can't take anything from people inside your imagination because there's nothing for them to give. It's only you in the end. So people respond to you in imagination. The moment you start to feel respectful, people in imagination will start to treat you respectfully. You start to expect that. And expectation is inside. You expect to think the best thoughts. Feel the feeling of expectancy, but in imagination feel it. Expect to think highly of yourself. And I think it's important, as I said, that the outer man must be vulnerable. And that you must be vulnerable enough to admit that you can't do it. That you don't have the thing you want. And that's why you need to assume you are the inner man who has it. So your goal is to become the inner man, not necessarily to go after material objects in the mind. So you don't focus on, as Neville says, the greatest pitfall is focusing on items and not the consciousness of being it. And the consciousness, you can just think of the inner man who has it. You must become that inner man who's already experiencing it. And I think that is the way I have found the freedom, that the way is I am. Well, what am I? In imagination, who am I claiming to be? How am I being treated? I must be vulnerable enough to admit that maybe I don't see myself as highly as I want to see, or maybe I don't feel highly of myself. I don't feel the way I want to feel about myself in imagination. But then be bold enough to assume a new state in imagination. As Neville says, dare to assume. And he says this, and I wanted to share this in the last video, but I didn't, is that should you tomorrow, or in the interval between now, this night, and you do it, and the fulfillment of it, should one little doubt enter your mind, do this. So he says, if you have a doubt after you feel the wish fulfilled, do this. He says, just remember, but I experienced it. I experienced ownership. So I don't care if at this very moment something denies it. I experienced it. So he equates experience with wish fulfilled. And that's where I changed my mind I wrote a series about this, is that changed my mind on manifest, and I actually don't think in those terms. It's all about experience for me. Is that I am what I am because I'm experiencing my reflection. So let me experience a new reflection within me. Not so that I can become it, but that I already am it in imagination. So I make the outer man less and less, and I make the inner man more and more. So that when I start to say the word I'm speaking as the inner man, who all things are possible to. I start to associate myself and identify with him within. That's about all I had to say, but I hope that helps to remove the pressure from trying to manifest and shift it to experience or to being, or to, as Neville says, feel the wish fulfilled. Make that the goal. That's what's important. And that requires a complete abandonment of your external world and complete fusion with your inner self. And then once you realize how wonderful that feels, you start to do it more and more, and then you get used to, I guess you could say, living in imagination. Yeah, so I hope that helps. Hope that relieves the stress and the worry on the mind, that the goal is to experience while you imagine, not to manifest, because the world is expressing imagination anyways. So I don't think you have to worry about expression. It's more about, are you who you want to be within? Are you actually the person you want to be? Are you actually feeling that you are who you want to be? Are you feeling that you're proud of yourself? Are you feeling ownership of the state that you want, as Neville says? And you know you have ownership by your experience of being it in imagination. Yeah, so hope that helps.